I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today, you guys are in for a treat. I first saw this man speak on Tony Robbins' stage years ago. And when I saw him speak, what he was saying really affected me. It really helped me go back to when I was a kid and the struggles that I went through. And it really made me realize that being in a victim mindset will never get us where we want to go in our life. And we can be victorious in our life instead to really make our future be what we want it to be. So I want to welcome Nick Santonastasso to our show. Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me. I'm ready to provide some value. Let's get into it.
I love it. I love it. So, you know, when I saw you speak so many times, I remember even taking a picture of you and putting one of your quotes there because I was like, it was so powerful. And I've seen you speak to adults. I've seen you speak to kids, and it doesn't matter who you're speaking to. You're always able to move the room. And, you know, I was watching some of your videos on YouTube just to get to know you a little bit more. And, you know, and you are like the real deal. Like you really have this message that really speaks to the masses. And again, it doesn't matter what age. And one of the videos, it was interesting because you really talked about the way you were raised and that strategic mindset. So, you know, going back to your childhood, where you came from and your whole victorious, where do you feel like it all started? And could you just share with our audience, you know, a little bit about you and your whole message?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give everybody some context, I'm 26 years old. And so in 1996, my parents went in for a late ultrasound. They pulled the baby up on the screen. The doctor started freaking out and there was something extremely wrong. And they said, well, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like your baby's limbs are being developed. It looks like he's missing his legs, his arms. He might have a cleft palate. And at that time in 1996, they painted a very dark picture of what this would look like for my parents. Just to give the audience context, because one of the biggest principles that I teach is what you focus on expands. What you focus on, you get more of. And in that moment, my parents made a massive decision. And the decision they made was actually to focus on the 30% chance of me living versus the 70% chance of me dying, right? And the reason being is because if you focus on the 70% of me passing away, you're going to feel all these negative emotions. My mom's going to be more stressed, more overwhelmed, probably not a good habitat for a baby to develop in. And so when I talked to my mom, she said she leaned into her focus, but she also leaned into her faith. You know, faith that's going to surrender to the process. And when everybody said to abort me, she didn't want to, that she was going to move forward with this pregnancy. And so I was born. I came out with my beautiful face. My face wasn't messed up. And the only thing that was affected were my limbs. All my organs were 100% healthy. And the way that my parents raised me, it's pretty funny because I am the youngest of four. So I guess my parents had some split testing, right? They could split test some things with the other children to see what worked and what didn't. And when I came into my family, they actually didn't even tell my siblings at first that I was different, like anything to my siblings, that there was complications, that there was going to be an interesting pregnancy. And when and this is how kids operate, is when they brought me home and I was wrapped up like little baby Jesus and they unravel me and I was missing my limbs, the first thing that they said were, look at his amazing hair. His hair is. They didn't even acknowledge that my limbs were different because we didn't put a microscope on the differences. So kids only know what they know, and they're taught things or they're conditioned a certain way. And so if my parents said, hey, it's going to be a little bit different, it's going to be a little bit hard, then they would have this specific perception of what I would look like. And so they let them kind of cultivate their perception on me. So I thought that was really beautiful. But Vinu, touching on what you were mentioning about the way that I was raised, I firmly believe that you can have all your limbs, all your legs, and all your arms, but still be handicapped by the way that you were grown up. the way that you were brought up. And by the way, to the audience, this is no poke. I'm not throwing stones at your parents or whoever you raised you. What we need to understand is that your parents did the best they could with what they knew and their current conditioning, right? We only know what we know. And so we're doing the best that we can do. And so what my parents did was at an early age, and they put my clothes in front of me, and in the most polite way, my mom's like, you always make me look so mean. But I'm like, in the most polite way, they were like, figure out how to put your clothes on, try to put your shirt on. And they would never physically do the work for me. They'd only give me verbal suggestions. And for the audience, this cultivated a few things. The first thing that it cultivated impactful is it allowed me to develop an amazing relationship with failure. This is a game changer, because if we look at if someone's values, right? If someone values, they want success, but they never want to experience failure, that's a conflict, right? You can't have success without failure. And so I have a little quote that usually sticks in people's heads, and it's, if failure's a friend, you'll learn to the end. If failure's a foe, you will never grow. And so right now, everybody listening, you can reflect or reassess your relationship with failure. Do you view it as a foe, or do you view it as a best friend? No legs, one arm. Failure is all up in my life. Anytime I tried to get on the couch, I tried to feed myself, I tried to put my clothes on, failure was everywhere. So I developed a great relationship with failure at an early age. But what it also cultivated my brain into is I became solution-oriented very early. Now, this is a game changer, because the truth is most humans going around focusing on the problems, so they get more of the problems that they don't want, right? But if you can train your brain to be solution-oriented, you see more opportunities. You see more ways that you can upgrade your identity. You see more ways that you can get to the next level of life, because you're programming your brain to focus on the solution versus the problem. If you break down psychology, your problems need focus to live. So have you ever had a small teeny weeny problem, but you focus all your energy on it and became massive and overwhelming, right? Like making what do they say? Like an anthill, a molehill.
Right.
By focus. And so those were the two things that age. But the same thing, my parents would put me in a high chair. They would put food there and say, okay, Nick, figure it out. And I'd fall on my face. And eventually I would feed myself. Clearly I got clothes on today, so I learned how to dress myself, right? So I just wanted to touch on that, because you could be handicapped and crippled by your upbringing. It's not necessarily your fault. Sometimes mommy's best intent isn't your best intent. Sometimes it is the right answer. Sometimes it's not, right? But what you can do is, as you grow older, you can start becoming aware of like, what was the way that I was conditioned? What was the things that I learned as a kid? Because with kids, most is caught, not taught.
Right.
Most is caught, not taught, meaning they may not listen to everything that you're saying, but they're watching everything that you do. So even the parents listening is like, how you show up in conversations, how you show up in relationships, how you treat your body. Do you watch everything?
That is so important. And I love the fact that you say that, you could be handicapped without even not having arms and legs or whatever. And I think you're right. I think our brain handicaps us, because I have 6 kids, and the way I did the first 2, which are 28 and 24, is way different than how I do my twins now that are 10, because I learn better, so I do better. And what I mean by that is, my kids were born typical. They have their limbs and everything. And yet I taught them how to fail. I was not that parent that was going behind them when they're learning how to walk, going, okay, I got you. I was like, okay, there's a toy, go get it. And they would get up and they would fall, and we would cheer for them when they fall. So they thought it was fun to fall.
Yeah. That's good.
And then when they get back up, we would cheer when they got back up. So now it's fun to get back up too. And now as they're getting older and they're doing more, they don't look at their failures as failures. They look at it as a learning opportunity of, okay, if I got it right the first time and I'm the best, then I don't have another level. But when I fail and I make a mistake, that has taught me now that there's another level to get to, and get excited to know what's that gap that you need to get to close. And I mean, I personally felt handicapped as a child because I'm Indian. I was born and raised in California. In my generation growing up I was born in the early 70s. people didn't understand Indian wasn't black. So I was seen as a black kid because you're either white or you're black. There was no in between. And I was definitely handicapped and not knowing on how to make friends, who really likes me, what was my self language, what was I saying to myself? I was saying everything people were saying to me, calling me names, saying I'm ugly, telling me that, my kids are going to look like trolls. And I believed it. My mind is what was handicapped. And that is what, and I mean, that's so important about your message because that's so true. And so as parents, it's really getting that solution mindset. It's like you said, are we spending more time in our problem or are we going to spend time in the solution?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
going forward, looking at you as an adult now, like you're this huge speaker, you teach people how to coach, you teach people how to build businesses, 7-figure businesses. You have all these amazing things going on for you. So how do you continue that momentum? Like, what is it like now as an adult? Because your parents set you up to win. Although some people probably thought it was cruel. Like, okay, the kid has no arms. How is he going to eat? Like, what are you doing? And yet your parents were like amazing because look at what you have now become, I'm sure on your own too.
Yeah. So real quickly to piggyback what you said about starting to believe thoughts. I just want to touch on this because I think it's really important. Is there was a moment for me when I was 12 or 13 and I was on a school bus and there was a girl to the left of me and she was making fun of everyone. And I'm like, oh man, she's gonna have a field day with me. And I look to the left, Nick, I don't even have to start with you. You're already too messed up anyway. Look at you. And as a 13-year-old kid, you don't really know how to react in that situation. And what happened, like you mentioned, is I started to believe the thoughts that she casted on me, that I was disgusting, that girls don't like guys with no legs and one arm. I'll never have a wife. I'll never have a girlfriend. And what we need to understand is based off specific experiences, whether they're good or bad, you start to develop beliefs about who you are. So you have to be very conscious of the lessons or the learnings or how the meaning you're attaching to experiences, because you're the meaning maker. It could be bad, it could be good. So in that moment, that was a total loss for me. It was a total failure. And because of that experience, if I look back, like I didn't go to my junior prom because of that. I didn't go to my senior prom. I was very introverted or very isolated. And I developed this perception that girls didn't like me. And that led me to a lot of pain. But now as an adult and you start to condition your brain to find the learnings and to find the gifts, I realized that I would have never catapulted to the next level if it wasn't for the experience that little girl gave me and the pain that I felt because of that experience. It was a great gift, right? And also because of that, I was going around the majority of my life asking myself, what's wrong with me? And maybe you're listening, primary question that's going on is like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough? And what's interesting about the brain is your brain is always going to give you an answer to the questions that you ask it. So you have to be very conscious of the questions that you're asking. And so I was going around asking myself, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why don't girls like me? And my brain's going to give me a bunch of answers. 18 years old, where I asked myself a better question. And the better question that I asked myself was, what's right? What's right about having no legs, one arm? And my brain didn't like that question because it was more empowering and it wasn't disempowering. And the answer that I got was, well, Nick, if someone wants to pick on you, or no one wants to date you, or no one wants to be friends with you because you're, well, maybe this disability or this curse, whatever you want to call it, is actually working as an authentic human filter. And it's filtering out the type of women and men that you don't want in your life anyway. Like, how empowering is that? And so as our mentor said, like when you change the story, you change life. When you change the meaning, you change your life. Into this right now, it's like, okay, Nick, well, how can I apply this into my life? Well, go back to a moment where you thought was a massive failure. Go back to a moment where you thought was a loss and ask yourself the golden question. And the golden question is, what was the gift? What was the learnings? Who did I become because I'm going through this? And also, my friends, the thoughts that you're thinking aren't yours. You pick them up along the way. And you mentioned that as well. You picked them up along the way and you started to believe thoughts of other people who were conditioned and weren't loved, right? Like, we're all going through some things and everybody's throwing their traumas at each other. So understanding that all of your thoughts aren't always yours and you don't have to always believe, right? But moving into, you're talking about the career and building things. I want to be super transparent and let people know that I think a lot of my drive to speak and to build big things was to fill the gap of not, like, trying to fill the void of I'm enough, please love me, please love me, please love me, right? And don't get me wrong, I had an amazing childhood and I was loved, but we learn and we catch on to things that we're not enough, and we're not valuable, and we're not worthy. And even me as a 26-year-old boy, is I'm still find myself saying, please love me, I'm enough, like, how can I over deliver, how can I bend over backwards and give you everything I have just so you accept me? And I share that because I know other people are going through that as well. And everybody can relate. Step to elevating yourself, whether it's your kid or whether it's yourself, is awareness. Studies show by the age of 35, you are 95% unconscious. 95% unconscious. That means if I had 5 fingers, I hold up 5, but only got 1. That means 5% of your brain is conscious change. That's not very empowering. Like, your thoughts, your actions, your words, your emotions, your triggers, they're on autopilot. You don't think about them. That's why if there's ever been a moment where you like snapped at someone and went, whoa, that wasn't me, it was an unconscious trigger, right? And so the first step is awareness. And then once you're aware of something, you can then strip power away from it. And so if anything comes up in this episode for people that maybe triggers you or maybe makes you feel a certain way or maybe rubs you the wrong way, like, note it, because there's work that needs to be done there. And everything that I say out of love, because there's more to be, more to give, more to serve, more to do. And I'm going to be that big brother, that coach to push you to the next standard of life. But I built all of this stuff to fill the void of my inner child not feeling like enough. And my practice now, just on a daily, just reminding myself of like, I woke up today, already won the life lottery. And the truth is, like, everybody listening right now, let me give you a perspective smack in the face in the most polite way. If you woke up today, you already won. If you got all your legs and all your arms, you're doing way better than I am. And if you're not in a country where you're hiding, bombing your town, what are we complaining about? Everything's additional. Everything you create, everything you do, everything you have is all additional. And leaning into that helps me feel like enough every single day. But also, what we need to understand is when we're in a state of gratitude, ultimate state of receivership, what that means is when you're in a state of pissed off, angry, overwhelmed, you cannot receive all the blessings that your creator gives you, and it's all around you. But when you're in a state of gratitude, you can see everything for what it is and all the gifts, but also your creator and the world, universe, whatever you believe in, is going to give you more because you're in that state of receivership. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but hey, I'm still trying to fill a void of, am I enough? Love me.
And I think that is such an important question. I too have just realized that, like, we go through this facade and I'm doing so much and I'm helping people, and I work with teens and parents to help parents and teens enhance their relationships so kids don't want to kill themselves. Like, that is my mission, to give kids a childhood they don't have to heal from. And that is why I started this TV show that's reaching over 1 million people right now, because we need to be that voice for the kids that don't know how to speak up, to say, hey, look, been there, done that. And I too have realized that there was still that, facade, I guess, because I thought, oh, I'm enough. I'm helping people. I'm coaching people. I'm an instructor for Joseph McClendon's Coaching Institute. Like, hell, I'm a trainer for Tony. Like, I made it. And still that little voice is, what do they think of me? What do they think of me? What do they think of me? And I was like, holy cow, like, that's running my program still. And I wasn't even aware. I was like sleeping through it, not even realizing that I was still wondering, what is everybody saying about me? What is everybody thinking about me? Until I realized the ultimate freedom was knowing that it doesn't matter what you think about me. I still have a mission to accomplish, and I'm going to do it the best way I know how, with the best resources I know how to achieve, and get that message out there. And all of a sudden, that freedom came. That freedom to step in front of people, that freedom to speak my mind and not say, oh gosh, should I answer that? Oh gosh, what are they going to think about me? Yeah, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to answer it because my answer might give someone else a different perspective on how to live their life without feeling judged. because that's what we're in. We're in a world of judgment. And so one of my messages that I always say is be curious, not critical. If we can get the curious mindset, so we're not critical and we're not judging people. When we see things that are not common and we want to judge it and say, oh my gosh, look at them, instead ask a better question. You know, one of the listeners says, how do you turn the question to stop being something for others? And I'd love to know your answer. My answer would be is pick a new question. You know, how could I be grateful today? What in my your question's my question all the time is in any obstacle of my life, I will always say, and what's the gift? So that's how I would turn it. So I would love to know how you would answer that.
Yeah, there's a small little shift everybody can make within their questions. And how can I experience God's love even more today? Or how can I experience love for myself even more? And by adding the even more, it's presupposing that there's already love. There's already love for yourself. Oftentimes people will start off and they'll say, well, how can I love myself? Well, when you ask that question, the perception is that there is no love. And so you can even just change the way you feel and change the question by like, how can I love myself today even more? And not only is your brain going to pick up on the right answers, but it's also priming you and letting you know that there's already love inside of you. And I think asking better questions is a muscle. Is a muscle. It's something that you have to exercise over and over again. And if you can't do it once and expect it to be fit for life, right? I wish I could go to the gym once and be jacked for life. It'd be amazing, but it's just not the case, right? And so start being intentional with the questions, but also everyone right now, start becoming more aware. Saying and what are you doing that doesn't serve you? I always mention this little quote, would you date the person that lives inside your head? Would you talk to your daughter the way that you talk to you? Would you talk to your mother? Would you talk to your answer's probably no. Everybody listening, the answer's probably no. And so start there. Start being aware of the programming. Start being aware of the tape. Start being aware of the voice over and over again and start shifting that. And that's the whole thing is awareness. And you mentioned with your pattern, like you weren't even aware, but now you're aware, you can intentionally destroy it. You can throw it out, like you can unwire it and rewire it. So I think it's beautiful, but question asking is a muscle. And just think about this. If you went 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years asking terrible questions, don't expect to ask great questions overnight. This is going to be a long process of unwiring and rewiring, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've heard many times, and different mentors say this, is like, we have trained ourselves to self-beat. It is time that we learn how to self-build. You know, as much as we have taken in the information that other people see us through their filters, what if you put your own lens on? What could you see? You know, and here's what I really find out about people, especially working with teenagers, is they don't even know what self-worth is. When you say, what is self-worth to you? They're like, I mean, I don't know. And we're wondering why depression is on the rise, anxiety is on the rise, because kids don't even understand the worth that they have, especially now, because parents are so busy rescuing them and I'll cover that. No, don't worry about it. I got you. It's allowing your child to fail forward. It's allowing your child to know that they have the strength within them to find their solution, that you don't have to keep rescuing them, that they're worth it. You know, giving your kids chores to do, it means that they're worth being a part of your family because they live in that home with you. It's, if we don't teach kids worth, they will never know it. But I'll tell you this, as soon as you have your worth, no one can take it away from you either. And so understanding that, here's a simple exercise that I give people. It's tell me someone that you love and admire. Are they worth it? What makes them worth your love? What makes them worth your admiration? Now see yourself. What makes you worth the same thing? And all of a sudden it mind blows these kids because they're like, oh my gosh, I do feel that like I am something. They stop self-harming. They stop their suicidal thoughts because all of a sudden they have worth in this world.
Yeah.
And it's all about the mindset. And I feel like that's what you teach. Like that's what I always get from hearing you talk. Like I can hear you talk on any stage. And every time you tell these stories, there's always a new lesson I get out of it, And one of them that I really see is taking our mindset from being the victim to being victorious. So what does that mean to you, Nick? Like being victorious? How do you go from victim to victorious?
Let's dive into this. So I would say I'm 26. For the majority of my life, I was a victim. So this is not me teaching and preaching from someone who was never in this mindset, right? So what's interesting about this day and age is victims get gold stars. They get it. They get significance from playing victim mentality. They want to post sad things or about their problems, and they know people are going to give them empathy and sympathy, and they meet that need that way, right? But what we need to understand is victims don't. That doesn't. It's not sustainable. They don't win long term. And I think the greatest analogy, the greatest philosophy is victim to victor is cause and effect. The law of cause and effect, right? And the law of cause and effect states every cause has an effect and every effect has its cause. But when you're a victim, you're blaming your current situation on everyone but you. You are, it's the government, it's the times, it's the way that I was brought up, it's my neighborhood, it's my school, whatever it is. And we're always casting blame because we don't want to take accountability, but it also feels good to blame others for why we're not where we want to be. That could be in sports, academics, money, relationships. You blame everyone else, right? And going from victim to victor, because when you go from cause and effect to understanding that you cause the effect, that every action you take, every decision you decide, every moment in your life, whether you go left or right, is going to dictate your results that you have in life. Like everybody listening, whether you're a kid, whether you're an adult, your body, your relationships, your mindset is a direct reflection of you, who you are. If you don't like it, then you need to upgrade, right? And so that goes from you in the passenger seat of life to the driver's seat of life, meaning like leaders take accountability for everything. Sometimes it's not even their fault, but they step up like, I'll handle it, right? And so I think there is a massive, like you take your power back when you take ownership. You take power back when you have accountability. And if you're a parent and you start taking ownership and that, they're going to want to be like that. They're like, wow, my dad takes ownership over everything. My mom takes ownership of everything. And by the way, let me just drop a nugget in here. And it's going to sound harsh, but I'm here to elevate the audience here today. One of the biggest forms of child neglect is the dreams.
Amen. I just need you to say that again because parents, I'm a parent too. We need to hear that. Can you please say that one more time? That was gold.
One of the biggest forms of child neglect is the parent not going after their dreams. Like you're going to tell little Susie to like follow her dreams, but she's like, Mom, you quit on yours. It sounds so harsh. But by the way, like your life is, and by the way, I'm not a parent, right? I'm not a parent yet. This is just from my exposure to teenagers, working with kids and working with adults as well. That I lost my, where was I? I lost my
parents not going after their dream is the biggest neglect.
Yeah. Understanding that your life isn't over when you're a parent. That's just a story that you created, you know, and I hear that from experience of like, well, I can't go on vacation, I have kids, or I can't go to the gym, I have kids. It's like, no, that's the story. It's like start creating your life in a way where you can have everything. Like you can have it all, but someone told you that you couldn't, or you were only exposed to people in your life who had unhappy relationships or were miserable as a parent. I don't know what it is, right? But sometimes we don't know what's possible because that gave us evidence that it was possible. If you grew up and your parents didn't have a healthy relationship, you probably believe that relationships aren't doable, right? If you grew up where your parents lived paycheck to paycheck, you weren't exposed to someone who had financial abundance. And that's not your fault. It's totally okay. Your duty to go find someone that can expose you to some good evidence.
Absolutely. And this is just gold because that is so true. I tell parents all the time is, you know, be who you want your child to be and better. So they don't hear you, they see you. And so that is so important that, you know, because I see parents all the time is like, oh, I support my kid, whatever they want to be, I support them. And like, and who did you become? Did you become who you wanted to be?
Mm.
Because that is what kids are seeing. And that is so important, because I even tell parents too that, I don't know if we should stay together. I don't know if we should get divorced. Well, he's beating you. And that is what your kids are seeing. And that is what your kids are becoming as a definition of a relationship. So what kind of relationship do you think your kids are going to go find when that's all they've been exposed to? Because they don't know in their mind what love is except for what they're seeing between their parents. So, the decision doesn't come like, oh, I'm going to sacrifice me for my kids, because then what are you teaching your kids? You need to sacrifice yourself for other people.
Mm.
And that is where I think society is lacking. We're constantly sacrificing ourselves instead of loving ourselves. And I continue to say this, that one of my good friends, Chuck, he says, you can have the best life and not be the best you, but when you are the best you create the best life. And so I invite the listeners to ask themselves, what does the best you look like? As a parent, what does the best you as a parent look like? And this is why it's called Redefine Parenting, because there's not one way to parent. Because I promise you, Nick, and I don't even know your parents, but I promise you, they parented you very different than they parent your one sibling and your other sibling. Like every one of you guys were probably parented different because you had different mindsets, you had different needs, you had different ways of being seen and heard and received. And that's what parents need to understand. There's not one way that says, you know what, I'm a conscious parent, so all my kids are going to come out great because that's the way I parented. It's be present to the needs of your child and what are they doing to get those needs met? Because it's kind of like what you were saying is that, depression is a double-edged sword because it gets them the connection and they want it, but yet they're tired of not being able to get out of bed. So, change your story of what do you really want? And if you need connection, what's a healthier way to get connection? You admitted that, you did all these wonderful things. You help people build 7-figure coaching practices. You've been on stages, you connect people. And there was still that boy inside you going, but am I enough? I've done the same thing. I coach, I speak, I have a TV show, and, I'm doing everything to serve the world. And there was still something inside of me going, well, what do they think of me? And it comes down to, am I enough? And so it's bringing an awareness to yourself and just asking yourself as a mom, as a dad. I think what's great, Nick, is that you're getting the experience now by working with an array of people, parents and kids, to really know like what kind of dad you're going to be to your kids, and you're getting a jump start. And, you don't need to be a parent to understand where kids are coming from, because honestly, as we both work with kids, we get the front row seat to really what's going on. Because I'll tell you, my kids don't tell me everything. I wish they did. I would like to think that I've given that open, safe, and trusting space. But my kids have a coach because they need someone to help see them through the filters that as their mom, I can't see them. And help support them in knowing the language that I'm not using for them to succeed in their life and to let them be. And that's where we need to be in this world. If we want to be a victor, like we want to have a victorious life, we first need to show up for our kids to show up.
100%. 100%. I think that's beautifully said. And what you're talking about with language as well, I really love how you have another voice, like a coach coaching your kids, because you can only see specific things and you see them through a specific lens. Most of our, like for us to dive into the brain, like most of our beliefs were cultivated between 0 and 7 years old. Like that's when you're super suggestible, your brain's in theta state. And so if I ask the audience right now, it's like, have you ever heard as a young boy, young girl, like big boys don't cry?
I bought the book because that was
big boy, right? Big girls don't cry, or money doesn't grow on trees, or this and that. And then you wonder why you have bad relationships with money, or maybe your parent, like there's so many rabbit holes. I mean, maybe your parents, their only form of love or how they showed love was yelling. And that was what they were taught. Like I think parents, like you said, have to live a victorious life and have your kids live a victorious life. You have to start doing the work as well. But also, no matter how smart you are, no matter how many brain books you read and you're teaching, it's like at the end of the day, I think you're going to mess up your kids one way or another, but it's giving them the right tools to work through the trauma, right? Like I think the perception of like I'm going to be a perfect parent and everything's going to be perfect, like you're setting yourself up for failure, because there's no such thing as perfection. And if you can surrender to that and just like go with the flow and learn and be intentional and upgrade and evolve as you go, you're gonna mess them up a little bit. Everybody gets a little messed up, and that's not your fault. It's just what happens. But the real key is giving them the tools, the brain tools, the way to work through emotions, the way to ask great questions to lead them to the gifts and the learnings. Because it's one thing to give some trauma, but it's another thing to give them tools to bring their childhood trauma, but throughout their whole entire life. And so I love everything you said, and I really enjoyed that your kids have a coach that's not you, so they can get coached from a different voice and outside lens. That's super cool.
I just think it's important. And it's so funny because I was telling one of my clients yesterday that, I got my kids a coach, and they're like, I mean, but you're a coach. Yeah, I am, but I'm not a coach to my kids. I'm a mom. I definitely cannot see what coaches can see, because my kids have that element too. How do I make mom proud? How do I make dad proud? How do I mean, that's why kids lie. They don't lie because, well, they do lie to stay out of trouble, but they want us to be proud of them. They don't want to know, they don't want us parents to know they made a mistake, you know? And, when we talk about, messing up our kids, I almost feel like it's inevitable. We have to do it to give them an opportunity to learn how to effectively blame, effectively blame me of how screwed up I was. I tell my older boys who, I was a single mom for 9 years with them. And I'm like, I look at them now and I look at, the trajectory if we do not change the way that we parent, because I see the outcome of how I parented my kids, of yelling and dictating and grounding and consequences and, shaming and blaming and manipulating them, trying to get them to be quote unquote perfect. And as you said, there is no perfect. There is progress only. And, I remember sitting down with my boys when they were adults. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I couldn't show up for you the way you needed me to. And they both said to me in different ways, like, Mom, you were the best mom. You were the best mom that we needed for us to be who we are today and for us to learn the lessons. And, in my mind, of course, there's a lot of self-beating because I see what I did wrong. And the moment that it shifted for me is the moment I realized that I did nothing wrong. It's exactly what you said earlier. I did the best that I could with what I knew at the time. And now that I know better, I do better with my twins. And it was giving me the opportunity to see that if we stay in the way that we were parented and we parent our kids that same way, they're going to have the same baggage that we're parenting through. And so I tell parents all the time, let go of your baggage, let go of who you think you needed to be or who you were or how you were raised, because we are raising a whole new generation. You know, my kids are never going to be the Gen X. Like, they're not. We're past the millennials. You're a millennial. We're past that generation now. We're almost past the Gen Z generation. Like, we're going on to another generation. So we're either going to keep up with the times. And, you said something and I loved it. And it's so true. We could either think that we're going to make our kids adapt to life, or we're going to teach our kids how. We're going to either, what do you say? You say we can't adapt. What? I don't know.
The world's not going to adapt to you. You have to adapt to the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Isn't that true though?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like the simple philosophy, right, is like when you throw yourself in uneasy water, you forced to drown or you forced to swim. Without being put in those situations, like you never take a chance, you never get in that uncomfort, right? And so even just letting your kid out, letting them fall down, giving them moral support, but like letting them scrape their knee and fall down on the bike, it's like just that simple act lets them know that like failure is inevitable, but it's not terrible. And if I go through discomfort, I'm going to get some learnings. I'm going to upgrade.
So, we've talked about the past. We've talked about how you've gotten here. So going forward in your life, you've overcome a lot of obstacles and you've created this great life for you. Is there anything that you still look at life and you fear?
Oh, I fear. Yeah, it's great. I think my biggest fear is not living up to my full potential. And I think often to look at like super successful people, they're more fearful of like not taking action versus like the fear of just staying the same. And I don't want to be the same person any day. I want to constantly grow and constantly evolve. And I often ask myself the question as well, care what others thought of me. Where would people right now listening, like, what would you be doing? What would you be creating? Who would you be serving? How would you be living life if you didn't care about the opinions of others and you took your power back? And so my biggest fear is just not maxing out my life to this full potential of things that I want to accomplish. But I know if I'm intentional, whatever is mine is going to be mine, and whatever my creator wants to give me, I will find and I will get.
And that's beautiful. And I think that that's so true for all of us, like understanding what our potential is and letting go of the parameters and the rules we put around creating it and just going out there and creating it. So looking at where you're at in your life now, what are you currently working on? Like, what are you doing now to expand yourself even more? Because I mean, you've coached, you've created coaching programs, you have spoken. Like, what's next? Like, where else are we going to see Nick? Like, what else is Nick doing?
Yeah, so Nick's diving into another industry. So roughly 2 years ago, my brother passed away from a heroin overdose, and ever since that, this whole sobriety industry, I mean, even just drugs and alcoholism is massive. And so I have partnered with Ryan Zofe, who owns multiple rehab clinics all over the country. It's called We Level Up, and we're going to be doing work to help lower relapse levels through personal development and all that we teach and that we were taught. And so I am diving more into that mental health, alcoholism, drug abuse industry to help people get sober and to stay sober, but more importantly, not only stay sober, but then become victorious, right? Take full accountability and upgrade their life. And so that's where I'm going to be spending some of my time as well into this new year. I've also been just creating, I have a current mindset program that's really just for the masses. I want as much people to be exposed to it as possible. Usually I do very high ticket coaching for thousands of dollars. But I'm very low barrier entry, like less than a dinner a month. And so that's something that I'm excited about. And then what we're also doing is I'm creating or have a very high level program for speakers that want to become an authority in their space, craft their message, and be able to monetize and leverage stages all over the world and impact the world just like I did.
That is so amazing. And I just say that, like, again, I love how you take what life gives you and you realize like there's, I'm going to take that and do something. Because if your brother didn't, overdose, would you be that voice for what you're going to be doing now? And so my brother just passed away in November due to a kidney liver transplant because of drugs. He lived a life of a drug addict as well. And so his liver and kidney just gave out, and so I am so excited for what you're going to do, because I think that I don't think there's a soul on this earth that has not been touched some way, somehow with addiction, somewhere in their life. So it is part of the masses out there that you're going to be helping. And again, what's the gift, right? Like, what's the gift? And people say it's so hard when you're grieving to find a gift. And grieving is a real thing. You have to feel what you feel. And when you're through it, I'd invite you guys to ask yourself, what's the gift? Like, what's next? Why did this, instead of saying, why did this happen to me, is like, why did this happen? And what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
And I love that you're doing that. I'm curious also, how is your relationship with your parents? Like, do your parents sit back and be like, oh my gosh, like, who knew he would do this? Like, I'm just curious, like, what your parents think of all this, since they're the ones that said, here, dude, here's your food. Figure out how you're going to eat it.
Yeah. That's a great question. I literally, like a week ago, I held a credit masterclass, credit, so they can get funding and then business funding. My parents were on the call learning from me. And so I thought it was super cool. And it kind of like full circle. My parents are super proud. I definitely blew their expectations out of the water, which pat myself on the back for that one. and I think, I always give them credit, I always give them praise, and I always send my love back to them. And thanks for having me and cultivating me into who I am. And now my ultimate driving force is to give my parents a life like they gave for me. And so I'm currently working on retiring my dad. My parents, all in all, want to get them a nice house in Florida so they can be snowbirds. They live in Jersey, but they're amazed, they're proud, and they're open too. They're open to like, wow, this kid knows some things, and so they learn from me as well. But the big thing that my parents did, and then I'm going to continue to do, and I would challenge everybody to do this, is to become the lineage leader, to become the person in your bloodline that changes it for everyone, right? Like if I look back at my generations, it's like first, I'm gonna be the first generation, right? And so it's like, and I don't say that to boast. I say that because like there's that quote, if you're born poor, it's not your fault, but if you die poor, it's your fault. Like, and that could be poor in all. I'm not just talking about your bank account, wealthy, relationships, experiences, right? And so my goal is to continue to break the head shackles. Everybody's got shackles that they give their kids. Break the shackles, break the chains, break the traumas, break the beliefs, pull out the things that I liked about my parents, and kind of like step away from the things that I was like, oh, I don't want to be like that. And it's totally okay to pick and choose, right? Not everybody's perfect. And when I have kids, I want them to be lineage leaders and blow my accomplishments out of the water. And if they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. But they're going to be exposed to information that can change their life. And if they take action on it, I think they'll be pretty good. But that's the thing for everybody listening, is you got to get exposed. Like our law of exposure. Once you're exposed, you cannot be unexposed. Once you learn something that has the ability to change your life, you can't look at life the same. And so I would challenge you to get in rooms. I would challenge you to come to these TV shows and continue to listen to all the amazing guests that Vinu has on, and expose yourself to information, because I'm a firm believer that you're one piece of information away, one episode, one handshake, one network from changing your bloodline and changing the trajectory of your life. And your ancestors did not build boats and fight off saber-toothed tigers for you to sit on your couch and watch Netflix and not do anything. And so let's be lineage leaders and shake our bloodline up a little bit.
Nick, this has been so amazing. And, I just want to thank your parents, because if they didn't have the courage to tell the doctors, kiss off, this is our child, we're going to have him. If your parents didn't have the courage to not put emphasis on what's missing instead of putting emphasis on what was already there, I don't know if we would be talking today. I don't know if you would have seen how great you were at such a young age. Even going through the voices of society, there was something in you that your parents created, even in the womb, that you were worth something. And, sometimes it takes us a while to see that. And I'm so grateful that you were able to finally look in the mirror and see what your parents intended for you from the beginning. And, there was a message on here. I don't know if you saw it, but someone said that they remember you when you were born, and that your father was a great friend to him. And even though he didn't deserve it, and he will never give up, that your dad never gave up on him, and that he feels like he owes him. So, I mean, that in itself speaks so highly of your parents and the upbringing that you had. And, for all the parents out there listening, I think the one message that I really heard from you today, Nick, is stop focusing on what's missing. Stop focusing on the disabilities. Stop focusing on what they're not doing right, and start focusing on what they do have, what they do see, their strengths, their love, and all the ability, because what we focus on grows exponentially. Thank you so much, Nick, for being here. Thank you to all our listeners. If you're finding value in our conversation here on the show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversation. Do someone you know a favor and share my group with them as well, so they too can hear what they need to in order to feel supported in their parenting journey. The show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.
Sending love.